So, hello, everyone, and welcome to another lunchtime talk. With me, I have my dear co-host Martin Duffy, and as you can see, we are both PhD, so we are your meeting doctors. Again, the subject for today is to reflect on the remote experience. It was a challenging subject, but unfortunately, our dear guest speakers are already so busy in helping everybody to deal with the remote working experience that they could not join us today, which is quite unfortunate. But we will be discussing among ourselves some of the ideas we will thinking about sharing with you guys, dear listeners, our own experience with remote work and what else, Martin, could we talk about in this half hour?
Yeah, well, I think the whole remote work issue in itself throws up a range of different subtopics or sub-issues, particularly from the point of view of our work colleagues and so on that have to engage in remote working. Because we end up with personal type issues, potentially family-based issues, psychological issues of isolation. We have potential issues around team development or team disintegration. That's so that just the concept of remote working. I think the fact that it was dropped on all of us so quickly, that there's a whole lot of other issues that are being thrown up by it, and figuring out how to deal with those issues is a challenge that everybody is going to have to face at some stage.
Absolutely, and I mean, what I found interesting about virtual work and remote work experiences is that there are some folks that are already thinking of that will be the future, and they are writing interesting articles about how to be a better self on the virtual world, right? So, and this is something that I would like to share with you guys. An interesting article that I have seen from a dear colleague that just published today on LinkedIn, here on LinkedIn, which is facilitating good relationships in online groups. This was published by a dear colleague, Simon Wilson, and I learned a lot with Simon, like I would say 10 years ago or 8 years ago when I attended one of his first workshops on how to work virtually. So Simon has a great deal of experience on this, and I'm eager to read about this article. And he also wrote a book on virtual meetings, a practical guide. So it's an interesting alternative to our own book on beyond virtual meetings. And I'm happy to share here this article from Simon. Any ideas on how to become a better self online, Martin?
It's a good question. I sat through just over the last 10 days. I sat through one kind of, not a webinar, it was actually a facilitated conversation, but we had about 55, 60 people on the talk. And specifically, it was around facilitating very large groups. And I suppose one of the key things that stood out for me from it was when the group moves to beyond about 6 or 8, you very quickly get to the point of needing more than one person facilitating in order to manage the breakouts that inevitably are going to be needed to get better group engagement. And you'll be familiar with this, Paul, from your own work just recently in Madeira. But then separately to kind of manage and hold together the content of the conversations that you're actually having. So there's the mechanics of running the online conversation, and then there's the actual facilitating of the content. Traditionally, in face-to-face, one facilitator could handle all of that together because it was all well integrated. Now with online work, I think that's substantially more difficult. And when the group gets bigger than what we're looking at, maybe 8, maximum 10 people, bigger than that, I think you very rapidly need co-facilitating.
Absolutely, Martin. And I already wrote about this. Even in physical meetings, whenever you have a meeting and you assign roles in the meeting, I think productivity of the meeting by default increases
Yes.
just by assigning roles. For instance, if you have someone to take notes and you assign him a specific role, are you going to be the note taker? Do you accept this role? So here is what you have to do. Please remind us about any notes that we are missing, or any things that we are missing from what we have just said. And
Yeah.
that becomes like the guardian of group memory, and it's an important role
Yeah.
that will enhance and improve meeting productivity. Have you got the same experience yourself with assigning roles in meetings?
Yes, although I think actually where I think the roles can, discrete roles like that, where they can almost be transcended, is by use of the right technology during the group conversation. So things like group map, house space, where the participants can directly engage, and effectively the notes are being built throughout the conversation. Now, for me, that actually produces two challenges. One is from the facilitator's point of view to keep track of the content as it's developing. And if you have content developing in different groups, in different breakout rooms, it's less easy to stay abreast of exactly what's developing and then to figure out how to bring it back together. Whereas I think the types of tools like Group Map and like House Space, they allow for this seamless reintegration of these different breakouts. So I think there's still a need for these types of roles for individuals to facilitate or sub-facilitate smaller groups. But I think with the right use of technology, we have it's slightly easier to pull the material back together into a cohesive piece. But it still leaves us with this overarching challenge of managing the technology and the breakouts and so on, versus keeping on top of the actual content as it's developing. So I haven't really seen how to do that other than to have two people facilitating once the group gets to a beyond 8 or 10 size.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's always a challenge, and definitely technology is so critical in virtual meetings. Perhaps already in face-to-face meetings, technology could have a role already.
Yeah.
I certainly used it on all my face-to-face workshops. I always use digital platforms for helping me as a facilitator to get a sense of what the group is trying to achieve and help me with the group recording. But now with the virtual and digital work, digital platforms with virtual online work become almost critical elements. What I think, and this is the recommendations you can find from our book, which I will be very pleased just to share here a little bit more about our own book on this event here with you, Beyond Virtual Meetings. And you can find here more information about the tools we talk about, different platforms that they are not so well known for the participants in this show. Perhaps this is the book, and you can follow us on LinkedIn too. There's a number of platforms that are not so well known, and that can definitely make a difference and an impact on remote work experiences too, right?
Yeah,
Martin?
absolutely. Yeah.
Any particular tool you like to mention in specific in this program?
Yeah, I think for let's call it the smaller scale, regular routine type of workshopping, even normal meetings that happen as part of remote working, I think Group Map is a particularly interesting, relatively easy system to adapt to, but a very powerful tool to enable small sized groups or large groups. I mean, it works fine with large groups as well, but to allow a group to engage, contribute, and then to have that recorded material at the end of that engagement. It's the equivalent of having the large whiteboard with, you know, the other board in the room that has the post-its, and with another board that has flip charts that we can start writing on. Something like Group Map allows us to do exactly the same thing digitally, where we have different types of interactions, different forms of interaction, and it's all contained in one package that then allows us to output the conversations into an actual written format or a written record. And I think that's hugely beneficial. I know there are plenty of tools out there, but I think the Group Map tool in particular, how it handles voting, contributions, I think the templates that they use are hugely diverse. They give you a running start, so you can jump in, use the templates, and don't modify them at all. So for a routine team that's just engaging in routine team interactions, I think it's a hugely powerful and hugely beneficial tool to make use of.
Definitely. And don't hesitate to talk to us, dear viewer, if you are thinking about improving your meeting productivity performance, regardless of in physical meeting, like we'll be talking in future shows on how to improve your company day, away day, and other kind of face-to-face events you're like thinking on hosting. Don't hesitate to reach out to us on LinkedIn here, because we'll be happy to give you advice on the next steps you should take in order to make that meeting event a success. And obviously also to recommend the digital platform that could be definitely a game changer in the way you organize your meetings. And also, I'm sure Martin will agree with me, an advice on how to create like a meeting policy in your organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is an important element. Martin, can you talk a little bit about the importance of having a meeting policy in an organization, in a company?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic, and again, in the book where we dealt with Elise Keith from Lucid Meetings, and that's where Lucid Meetings are particularly strong, where they offer a really good offering on that whole area of, I'll call it conceptualizing your meetings. So let me take for example, if you've got an organization that, you know, let's say it produces bicycles, and they've been producing bicycles for the last 50 years, okay? If somebody in that company decided, we're actually going to move into producing different types of bicycles, we're going to produce electric bicycles, okay? Can you imagine an organization doing that, but not actually planning it, just doing it, okay? And all the time and resources that would be needed, but we'll just do it without laying out any kind of a plan. And the answer is, well, no, you couldn't really imagine an organization changing in that way. Now let's look at meetings through exactly the same lens. So in meetings, when you think about the amount of time and resource that are invested in meetings, but tell me any company, and any company watching might want to come back at us, but do companies routinely plan their meetings as a collective organizational resource? And if they don't, is it more or less the same as starting a brand new product in your organization, but just don't plan it? And you kind of say, surely there's a fundamental need to exercise some kind of planning function over it. So one of the things that Lucid Meetings tends to focus on, and it's a topic that I focused on in my own research on organizational meetings, is this concept of streams of meetings. So you take functional groups, take the production team, take the sales team, take the actual company board, take the executive team. So all of these different groups have their own stream of meetings. So whether it's, you know, it might be the once per month meeting of the company board, it might be the once per week meeting of the executive team, it might be the daily production planning meetings. But the point is that all of these different types of meetings for different groups may require different ways in which to make best use of the time that you've got available. But that sort of discrimination between the needs of different groups versus the types of meetings that will fulfill those needs, we tend not to make those types of discriminations. And it's in that context that I think there's a huge benefit to stepping back from an organization's current meeting practices to look at how their meetings are used, what they're used for, what outputs you get from them, and then to reconsider ways in which these different meeting streams from different groups can be reconfigured to get the best possible outputs for the amount of time and resources that actually go into them. So it's a planning function. It's a specialist area. It's something that organizations typically don't think about. But experience tells us when you do think about it and plan it, there are potentially considerable efficiencies to be gained from taking the time.
If you have already in place that meeting policy procedure in your organization, if you're already clear on what are the outcomes of the meetings you need to do, then online, physical, it won't matter.
Absolutely.
You'll still be a productive organization. Now, the problem is that when you're forced to go online without having this well-thought meeting policy in place, and some folks say, oh, why am I supposed to do in back-to-back meetings 8 hours in a row, and then you start to feel Zoom fatigue, these kind of problems, and say, oh, my friend, that's you're suffering from another real problem, and bad meetings are just a symptom for something else that you need to address before going online on a Zoom meeting.
Yeah. Well, there's just as an example of that, Paul. Like I was attending a meeting about 5 days ago. There were about 9 people in the meeting. It lasted for about an hour and 20 minutes. And as I worked down through the agenda and listened to what participants had to say, I reckoned that the meeting could have taken just 20 minutes instead of an hour and 20 minutes. And the time spent in the hour that could have been saved could have been used individually by participants doing their own preparation, their own reading of material in advance of the conversation. So, for example, 20 minutes taken up by somebody presenting for 10 minutes or 15 minutes on a particular topic, a presentation, a piece of research, whatever. If you send people the piece of research, they can read it themselves. But the time might be better spent with a focused question and answer session. Or before you get to the meeting, you might invite participants to say, read the material and please refer back with one topic from this material that you think we need to develop collectively as a group. Now you're starting to use your meeting time in a more targeted, more focused, more productive way. And you're now helping yourself to avoid the Zoom fatigue that so many people are starting to complain about. So, I think it's too easy to say, let's convene the Zoom meeting.
Yeah, that's good.
And everybody comes on the Zoom meeting and we talk for an hour and a half. Do we actually need an hour and a half? Can we manage our time better and differently? But to do that, I think we have to step back. And as you said, Paul, we have to plan it a little bit more. We have to structure it a little bit differently in order to get the benefits back out the other side.
Absolutely. So I do realize that there are companies out there like McKinsey, and this is an interesting author here, Karen Reed, on virtual meetings. This is a research I will be pleased to share. Anyone who would like to contact us, I'm going to read this in the weekend. But what attracts me on this is the title of this book, Martin, Suddenly Virtual. Yeah. It's this suddenly virtual thing, that forcing companies that were unprepared because obviously they didn't thought that meetings are a resource that needs to be planned, a meeting policy that needs to be in place. And definitely that's something that we are eager to assist any one of you have some bounce ideas on thinking the best way for you to structure your meetings in your organization.
Yeah.
Regardless of the type of organization you are, talk to us. Meeting doctors will be glad to assist you.
Yeah, but it as you put up that title, suddenly virtual. It struck me, Paul, that maybe an awful lot of organizations are suddenly meetings. That because we haven't invested the time or effort to think through our meetings and our meeting requirements. That there's this sense sometimes that we're just doing it because we've always done it this way, and we don't have any other choices except to do it the way we've always done it. And I would say, no, we have a lot of choices. We've just never made the choices about our meetings explicitly. I think the suddenly virtual, it partly forced us to think a little bit about it, but I think we got more focused on managing the technology rather than managing the meeting resource. So I kind of feel that there's been an opportunity missed in the switch to suddenly virtual, that I think we could have done a little bit more root and branch examination of meetings. I don't think we've done that as much as we could or should have. And I suppose I'm a little concerned with the remote working issues that are starting to crop up. I'm a little concerned that opportunity might have passed some organizations by on that front.
Absolutely. And definitely for the manager out there, because I was for 10 years the CEO of a growing organization. And I normally, I could just imagine if today it's so easy to call up on a meeting, because, everybody's working from home on Zoom. So it's so easy to call up a meeting. So think twice or even 3 times before calling a meeting on Zoom.
Absolutely.
It's probably you have other concerns you need to address. I mean, there's incredible platforms that you can use for making sure that you bounce ideas with your colleagues without actually hosting a meeting. You can use Slack, and you can create like a house space in your organization, or Lucid, have Lucid meetings platform in your organization to bounce ideas, to prepare thoughts, to communicate before the actual physical meeting or online meeting you need to have. And if you do that properly, you realize that the duration of the meetings will be much shorter.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And eventually what you need is not a meeting, is a workaway day or a workshop outside, so that everybody gets on the same page. And you need a lot more time than just 45 minutes.
Yeah.
If you call a meeting to discuss important strategic issues and you have only allocate 1 hour, you suddenly feel that the time is not enough, and everybody will leave the meeting unsatisfied because you didn't address the problems.
Yeah. I think on that point, Paul, maybe, focusing, particularly if you call a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting or whatever, I think being rigorously clear on what outputs are we looking to produce at the end of our 30 minutes or 40 minutes or 50 minutes or whatever, that as you said, it's a little too easy to convene the meeting. It's a little too easy to attend because we don't actually have to leave our desk. We just point and click. But if we're going to spend 40 minutes, we really do have to sharpen our pencil on what outputs are we going to have per item on the agenda. But that now brings us back to your earlier question about replanning, reconceptualizing our meetings, and can we do better in that planning phase that will help us to make less or to use less time on the meetings and more time, working on parts to deliver the outputs that we're actually looking for.
Definitely. Indeed. And talking about remote experiences and the remote work experiences, I received a call today from a new company, and it's called I Feel. Have you heard about these guys?
I haven't heard that, Paul, no.
Oh, let me share here, because they're a quite interesting company that works with individuals as well as with companies to increase the well-being of
Okay.
the members of an organization online. Let me see. It's called I Feel Online. They're online psychologists. Being a psychologist myself, I identify a lot with these folks, and I congratulate them for the what they have discovered is a way to help companies to have more productive teams that are working on remotely, and it provides support, emotional support for the employees, right? So you see, that's a number of companies already adopting their services, and it's really important. But it also reminded me, Martin, about the fact that companies do not actually measure the kind of emotional stamina of their workforce up front, right? So everybody complains about Zoom fatigue, like it was like something like a monster. But are you actually taking the proper observation of how your team is feeling about working remotely?
Yeah. And isn't that perhaps one of the biggest challenges is what mechanisms, what tools do we actually have to take an accurate assessment of that? Do you have any thoughts on that particular aspect of it, Paul?
Martin, my concern is that's why I recommend folks to read our book, Beyond Virtual Meetings, because we talk about that in one of the chapters. One of the platforms, Meeting Quality, can actually help you to assess what is the level of emotional distress that your workforce has right now, and what how meetings are impacting for the better or for the worse that kind of emotional distress that they can have by working remotely. But if you as a manager, you don't have accurate information, if you don't ground your decisions based on data, you are just working by instinct, and normally this can lead to disastrous decisions.
It's too easy to lose sight of what exactly the team and the group are doing. I suppose in that context, again, it's well profiled in the book, Paul. The Meeting Quality has developed a particularly simple, but I think a particularly insightful tool to enable that sort of evaluation to take place. And the basic concept of having literally a 45-second survey at the end of a meeting, but then cumulatively over time, seeing how people's aggregated responses about their experience of working remotely, how that is trending, becomes really interesting. Because there's two main features about the whole remote working area. One is the question of productivity. So a lot of people have expressed concern that if people aren't in the office, are they actually going to be working? Does productivity go up, go down, or stay flat? But the second question, and I think this is the one that a lot of us are now having to wrestle with, and that's the sustainability question. That the arrangements that have been forced on us in some ways, can we actually sustain them now if we start reverting back post-pandemic, as vaccinations take hold, as societies and economies start reopening? Are we going to see people reverting back into the office, or are we going to start seeing a hybrid? We're going to start seeing 2 days per week or 3 days per week in the office with 2 or 3 days per week remotely. And then how will we know if we're actually striking the right balance? And these are really simple questions that Meeting Quality asks meeting participants to give simple, short, succinct answers to. But then when you track people's trends in that data over time, you start getting early warning as to whether your arrangements are sustainable or not. So I would very strongly encourage people to consider looking at something like Meeting Quality as a way to benchmark or barometer the actual arrangements that you have in place for your remote working, and whether it's sustainable or not.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Go ahead and read our book. I think you will get benefit from the information you get there and articles that are written, and it will open up the scope of a range of tools and platforms that can improve your productivity as a manager on any kind of team or organization.
Yeah.
Okay, Martin, 30 minutes after the hour, I think it's time to say goodbye and have any recommendations for our viewers here. And thank you so much for your likes and comments. And I think we are eager to start a new subject in the next month. We're going to discuss a range of themes that we'll put up front for you guys. Thank you so much, Jari, for your comment, and Cristina Vaz de Almeida for watching us. And over to you, Martin, for final goodbyes.
Yeah, well, I suppose for our next discussion, Paul, the whole concept of strategy workshops, before the pandemic, before we all started working remotely and working through Zoom, strategy workshops were a very away days and so on, planning days. They were a very standard sort of feature of many organizations. I suppose there's a question now as to, are they gone? Are they past their sell-by date? If they're not, does their format and content fundamentally need to change? The amount of time that we give to them, does that need to change? Or do we do strategy workshops not as a 1 day or a 2 day away day, but do we do them as a series of 2-hour events with smaller groups with a better way to join them together? So for our next discussion on our fireside chat, Paul, that's the theme that we'll pick up and just see where the discussion might take us.
Okay, so watch this channel and stay with us. Next month, first week of June, first Tuesday of June, we'll be here again with you to discuss this important subject matter. Again, thanks for watching. Thanks for your wonderful comments. And Martin, it was really a pleasure to be here with you again.
Good to see you again, Paul.
See you soon.
Yeah,
Bye.
talk soon. Bye-bye.